From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, real therapists. Do you want free advice? Visit us at podtherapy.net or tweet to us at podtherapyguys to submit your questions to the show. Our last episode was a hit thanks to our special guest. This week, we try to prove that we can do it without her.
I believe.
Broadcasting from Level 9 Studios, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy. Okay, so today, if you're listening to this will be February 1st,
yes.
Which means we're past our first month
in
2018.
Success.
So for everybody out there who did a New Year's resolution, I just want to say that there's always next year.
There's next year, yeah. So you went to the gym this morning.
I did.
Is it packed, or is everybody gone now?
No, they're gone.
Everybody's gone?
Yeah.
Did you notice all of January?
Yeah, no, like June 15th.
Wow.
It's done.
June?
I'm sorry, January.
January 15th. Okay, so
15th,
by
yes.
halfay through January, everybody's gone again.
Pretty much.
But those membership dues, they happen every month.
You're locked in for a while.
That doesn't change.
Which is awesome. It's fine for me because it keeps my rates down. So I like that. Okay, that's your cell phone?
Yeah, that was my cell. I got a text message.
We turn those off during the
podcast. Oh, geez, I'm so sorry. You know what? It's Hova. It's Jay-Z. He's letting me know that he's running late, man. He's in traffic. So he's not going to make it to the show. But he said, go ahead and run the clip.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks. Jay-Z's not going to make it today.
Yeah, geez, this is embarrassing, Nick. I'm sorry. I should have had it on mute. Right. You know what? I'll mute it now.
I guess we'll have to do this without him.
I'm going to text him back and just say, you know what, buddy? We have to do the show. We have to do it.
The show must go on.
The show must go on, Jay-Z. But we're going to run the clip, though. So this last week, Jay-Z was on CNN with not me. I think it was Van Jones, better guy than me. And he talked about a lot of different things, but he actually talked about therapy. And he talked about how he has gotten therapy and how his marriage succeeded because of getting therapy. And I thought it was really important to grab this clip. And since Jay-Z is not going to make it to the studio this afternoon because it sounds like he's stuck in traffic, I guess we'll just go ahead and run the clip. So we'll run the clip from CNN and we can talk about that a little bit. Yeah, so that's the only reason he's not going to make it is because that dang traffic on Las Vegas Boulevard. So we'll go ahead and run the clip and we'll take a look at it.
You know, mental health, trauma, PTSD is so rampant in our community. But, as scared as black folks are of the cops, we even more scared of therapists. Like, we're not trying to go to therapy.
Yeah, it's a stigma.
It's a stigma. It's a stigma, and people are dying. You went to therapy. You talk about it. Yeah. How did you get over the stigma of going to therapy and then talking about it? Because you might you might save a life just talking about that.
Well, as you grow, you realize the ridiculousness of the stigma attached to it. It's like, what? You just talk to someone about your problems, And I think actually it should be in our schools. I think children have the most going on. Their mind are not fully developed, and, teenagers, and you're drinking, and you're doing damage to your brain, and, all these things are happening to you, and you don't know how social anxiety and all these things are happening to you, and you don't have the language.
That's right.
You don't have the language to navigate it. How can you navigate it? How can you know when a guy is bullying you? All you have to do is say, man, you okay? You could change the whole thing. So as opposed
those kind of tools and skills can get out of therapy, which we don't have enough of in our community.
Man, that's just huge. And so Jay-Z talked a little bit about going to therapy himself, how he uses that word stigma, Nick. He says, this is silly, because Van Jones says, hey man, how did you kind of deal with that? What do you think about that? And I really appreciate that Jay-Z sort of like laughs at that and says, this is dumb. Like, it was just talking to somebody. Like, that's all I did.
Right. If it's kind of like, well, have you ever had coffee with a friend and talked about something serious?
Right. That's
therapy is not that far off.
It's a better friend.
Right. And
a friend that doesn't interrupt you talking about his life.
Right. Somebody who's kind of trained to communicate, but for all intents and purposes, that's essentially what it is.
It is. And another thing I'm really glad about with why he came out and said this, I think a lot of people misunderstand who gets therapy. And a lot of people think, well, I don't need it, right? Because I'm not hearing voices or something extremely serious. And a lot of people think of getting therapy as a form of concession. Like, oh, if I go see the therapist, I'm broken, I lose, I need help, and I'm doing air quotes around that. And here's this guy, Jay-Z, who, Nick, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty confident I'll never be more successful than Jay-Z. And I don't know.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And so, like, I feel like if Jay-Z can go out and get something out of therapy, any of us can. I mean, come on, man. Jay-Z's married to Beyonce. Like,
Yeah, how rough can his life really be?
how bad is it? And like, but he's got stuff. So I think all of us could benefit from seeing a therapist, right?
Right. And the other thing, too, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be something where it's like I have a problem, so I go into therapy to address the problem. There's also maintenance.
Right.
You know, where it could be a problem that you've had a long time ago that you're still kind of dealing with.
Yes.
And it's not uncommon for people just to come back after they've completed therapy, to come back again a little bit later just to kind of, discuss what progress you've made and what progress you hope to continue to make, and how
with
do you
my
maintain
clients,
that.
I call that a booster shot. So
Yeah.
I would have guys that would come in every week, and eventually we'd start seeing each other every other week, and then once a month. And then I'd tell them, okay, I want you to come in 6 months and give me an update on what's going on. And let's just continue to take an honest look at what you came in here to work at, and let's see if we're still having that progress. So if you're out there, guys, Jay-Z can go get therapy, right, to deal with life. And so you don't have to wait until you have a diagnosed mental illness. It doesn't require that. You don't have to be in the grip of substance abuse or addiction or a debilitating sort of pattern of self-destruction. That is a good reason to go see a therapist. But another good reason is just feeling like your life is not where you want it to be, just feeling restless, unhappy, listless, being concerned that you're not living up to your potential. These are all good reasons to go check in with a therapist. It's one of the healthiest things you could possibly do. And who knows, maybe if you go see a therapist, you too will end up married to Beyonce and winning the Grammys Lifetime Achievement Awards.
Yeah.
And maybe being featured on Pod Therapy, which
Perhaps.
he could have been, but he
Could
got
have been.
stuck in that traffic, Nick.
So let me ask you this, Jim. What would you say to the individuals who are considering therapy, but their main concern is, I don't want to go in there and then be given a diagnosis and have that on my medical chart for the rest of my
Sure.
life?
Yeah. That's a fear, but that's not real. So the first thing people have to understand is your records are the most confidential thing ever. Like, there are so many laws to protect this. If you have an insurance, then yeah, your therapist might be writing back to your insurance to say, it looks like we're talking about depression or whatever. But your insurance also knows, the results of your blood tests, last week. So that stuff is not public. That's never going to be something that gets out there. That's not a good reason to not see somebody. And 9 times out of 10, guys, we do not use labels. We're not usually going to diagnose you with anything. If there's something we think we see, we're going to tell you about that. But it's very common for somebody to come see a therapist just to work on general life stuff. And there's not a code for that. There's not a word for that. We're just doing life together in a strategic and intentional way. And that's what I think Jay-Z was doing, And I'm not going to confirm or deny, Nick, that Jay-Z is my client, because that would be unethical. So I'm just going to leave it right there. But,
Right.
do we hang out? Yeah, we hang out, when he's in town, when he's not stuck in traffic.
Right.
I mean, yeah, did he text me just now? I mean, I'm not going to say if he did or not,
Sure.
but
Of course.
that is the ringtone I have for Jay-Z. So I guess we could just say that.
Right.
That I use the Mario Brothers
Yeah, and
ringtone.
I'm not even going to challenge you on it.
You really can't.
I'm just going to let it go.
You got to let it go.
So one other thing that Jay-Z mentioned in that clip is he talked about how important it is for young people, students,
Yes.
children to get involved in therapy. And he made the comment, this should be in our schools. Well, and actually, it, for the most part, is.
Yes.
It is pretty common now for schools to have a licensed mental health counselor,
Yes.
an LMFT marriage and family therapist, or a licensed clinical social worker,
Right.
somebody there to meet with the kids. But the issue of the stigma still remains, not necessarily on on behalf of the kids, but the stigma that the parents may still have about therapy.
Right.
You still have to break through to them, because a therapist can't meet a child without the
parent
consent
being part of it.
of the parents.
So in Nevada, Nick, this has been something that we've really created in the last couple of years, is introducing psychotherapists to schools. And they actually changed the regulations, because before you could only be a school counselor if you were a guidance counselor, and you really had to be focused on things like academic testing. But that's changed, and now they're actually bringing in psychotherapists. But the problem that we're seeing in Nevada, and this was a headline I saw just last night, is that there's not enough. And so there's not enough people that are psychotherapists that are really applying for these jobs. And they're asking the community, why? Why aren't you guys signing up? And I think part of it is it's a new industry for us. That's not a common place for psychotherapists to go. And secondly, we can't be sure that the funding is going to continue to be there. Like, is this a one-year gig? You know, should they give up their private practices? Should they stop calling back their patients and focus on a school? It's a big commitment. And so it's kind of something where we want to see that permanent kind of state support before the industry really goes and steps into, you know, an education environment rather than a healthcare environment. So progress, man, making huge progress, but a long way to go.
Yeah, definitely.
So our first piece of advice, our first question that we get comes from an anonymous writer, and it's a very simple one, and here's what they write. What should someone know before going into therapy? I've really wanted to go for a fair amount of time, and I think I have the courage to ask for help. Is there anything I should know before doing therapy? What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's good to have some realistic expectations about what therapy is going to be about. I would go into therapy first with an open mind. You are meeting a therapist. This is going to be your first encounter.
Right.
Keep an open mind because not every therapist is the same.
Yes.
You could hit it off with this therapist and it could be great and wonderful, or you may not. And therapists have different perspectives, different ways of providing therapy. There are some that will do what we call solution-focused brief therapy, which is not meant to be long-term. It's meant to really kind of focus on identifying where you're at now and getting you where you want to be.
Yes.
Not digging so much into the past, not getting back into, well, how did you get in this spot? But really just kind of looking at where do you go from here? I had a professor in college who kind of explained it like, it's like you're driving this car and you're pulling this trailer behind you, and this trailer is your past, and it's weighing you down, and it's keeping you from doing what you want to do. A solution-focused brief therapist is going to go in there, and instead of taking you back into the trailer and examining every piece of this and figuring out how it got here, we just unhitch the trailer.
Right.
And then we go.
Focus on the road. Yeah.
And then there's going to be other therapists that will have more of like a psychoanalytic approach. So our guest from last week, Sydney Smith, that's kind of what she does. And there's nobody saying that, well, this is the right way to do it or this is the wrong way to do it. It's whatever you as the individual, you as the patient, it's whatever's meeting your needs.
Yeah.
There are people who do psychoanalysis and they will stay in it for years.
Right.
And it's not that they're in it for years because they're not improving. It's because it helps them.
Yeah.
It's kind of a maintenance thing. It's something we're never done working on ourselves, right?
Sure.
So it's something that we're going to continue to develop, continue to address.
Well, I think you said something that I hope the listener takes away. So his question was, what do I need to know before seeing a therapist? And I think you brought up a good point. A therapist is one of the most personal experiences you can have with healthcare. So the guy who's going to do your colonoscopy, you might not even meet that guy, and it might not really matter to you, who he is, what his background is, how he thinks about the world, right? You don't care. But a therapist is a very personal experience, and so it's very normal for people to want to select a therapist that seems to be somebody they could relate to and, has something about them that's attractive and compelling to the patient. And so, my first advice to this guy is take your time, do your best to try to do some research and find somebody that seems like a good fit. But if I can get on my soapbox for a second here, Nick, in Nevada healthcare, things have really changed. And what they've done is to save costs, they've bundled everybody. And they say, hey, you don't get to go out there and find your therapist anymore. This is the group that we work with. If you have our insurance, if you have ABC insurance, you go to ABC Therapist Agency, and you do not get a choice anymore. And what I'm seeing is patients who are very frustrated with that because they're just being pushed through the system, and they don't get that opportunity to make a decision.
Right.
And the other thing you talked about was psychotherapeutic theories or techniques. Yesterday, I met with a psychology student here in Nevada who asked me, what is my theory and what do I use? And I was explaining I actually use solution-focused brief therapy, which you mentioned. But there's at least a dozen other ways of doing things. There's cognitive behavioral therapy. There's dynamic theories. There's marriage and family therapy, which is its own actual approach. And there's some Freud, right? Psychoanalysis. Right. What I explained to him was, because he asked me which one was better, and I said that's not how it works. And you said this as well. I said it's kind of like mixed martial arts. It's kind of like UFC or MMA fighting. You're allowed to use any technique you want, and you have the same objective, which is beat up the bad guy, right? So solve the problem, but you're allowed to use any combination of tricks to get that problem solved. And so I think, again,